A wealthy and charming man, Alex, believes love is a game he can always win, until he meets Maya, a woman immune to his charm and wealth. Her quiet confidence and refusal to be impressed challenged everything he thought he knew about relationships and women until Maya decides to teach him life doesn't revolve around wealth and affluence alone. Once upon a time, there lived Alex, a man who had everything: money, charm, and the kind of smile that made hearts race. He could have any woman he wanted, and he did. To him, love was nothing but a game, a way to pass the time, something to be bought with gifts and expensive dinners. He didn't believe in deep connections or true love. His relationships were fleeting, and he didn't mind. The world was his playground, and women were his toys. But something was missing, and he couldn't quite figure out what. He lived in a luxurious penthouse, surrounded by wealth and material things, but the emptiness lingered. Sometimes, in the silence of his expensive home, he wondered if there was more to life than this. He never let those thoughts show, though. He'd rather focus on his next conquest. Alex walked into the room, the noise of the bustling city below drowned out by the smooth jazz playing softly in the background. His penthouse, perched high above the world, was a symbol of everything he had worked for. The finest clothes, the most expensive wine, the rarest pieces of art, it was all at his disposal. But none of it mattered. None of it made him feel the way he imagined it would. He had everything, yet it felt like nothing. His past relationships had come and gone like fleeting shadows, each one ending the same way, empty, transactional, and devoid of anything real. He was proud of his ability to manipulate and control, to use charm and wealth as tools to get what he wanted. Women were no different than anything else in his life, just another object to be collected, another transaction to complete. He didn't need love. Or so he thought. Then he met Maya. She walked into the bar like she was part of the city's pulse, as if she belonged to something bigger than this world Alex had built for himself. His gaze followed her as she sat down, her eyes scanning the room with a quiet confidence. It was the first time Alex felt a twinge of unease, like something inside him had stirred that he couldn't quite identify. He approached her, as he always did, ready with his charm, prepared to win her over with his wealth. But when he spoke to her, she didn't give him the satisfaction of falling for it. "Do you know who I am?" Alex asked, his usual arrogance creeping into his voice. "I do," Maya said, her tone calm but unwavering. "But I'm not interested in who you are or what you have." The words hit Alex like a slap to the face. He blinked, taken aback. No woman had ever spoken to him like that before. Not interested. He laughed, but it wasn't a genuine laugh. It was a laugh that betrayed a crack in his confidence. "You'll change your mind." "I won't," Maya said simply, her eyes never leaving his. "Because you're not offering me anything I need." The days that followed were filled with a restlessness Alex couldn't explain. He couldn't stop thinking about Maya. For the first time, his wealth, his charm, none of it seemed to matter. He had to see her again. He had to break through whatever wall she had built around herself. He called her again, this time asking her to meet him for dinner at an upscale restaurant. To his surprise, she agreed. Alex, of course, expected her to be impressed. But when they sat down, Maya remained composed. She didn't fawn over the silverware or the expensive wine. She didn't seem interested in him or his carefully curated image. She was indifferent. "Why do you live like this?" she asked, after a long silence. "Live like what?" Alex asked, genuinely curious. "You live in a world of illusions. Everything is about appearances, what's on the surface. But underneath, it's empty. You've surrounded yourself with things, but you're still alone." Alex didn't know how to respond. Maya's words were like daggers, cutting through the facade he had carefully built for years. He was used to being admired, used to be in the center of attention, but Maya wasn't impressed by him. The weeks that followed were an emotional tug-of-war for Alex. He couldn't understand why he was so drawn to Maya. She didn't need anything from him. She didn't want his money, his status, or his superficial charm. In fact, she seemed to see right through him. But that only made him more determined. He invited her out again, this time to a private rooftop. The view was breathtaking, and the setting perfect. He poured them both glasses of champagne, waiting for her to soften, waiting for her to let down her guard. But Maya didn't even look at the view. She simply sipped her drink and stared into his eyes, as if waiting for him to reveal something. "You think you can buy my affection with these things," she said, setting her glass down. "But love doesn't come with a price tag." Alex's frustration grew. The harder he tried, the more Maya pulled away. He was used to getting what he wanted, used to being able to win anyone over. But Maya wasn't like the others. She didn't care about his money, his power, or his charm. It was as if she didn't need him at all. Every conversation with her felt like an intellectual battle, a challenge to everything Alex believed in. And the more he tried to convince her, the more he realized that it wasn't her he needed to win, it was himself. He started to question his own life, his choices, and the emptiness he had felt for so long. He was beginning to understand what Maya had been telling him. Love wasn't something you could buy. It was something deeper, something that had to be earned. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, during a late-night drive through the city. Alex was alone, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. He couldn't stop thinking about Maya, about what she had said to him. Her words had started to chip away at the walls he had built around himself. Suddenly, it hit him. His entire life had been about control, controlling the people around him, controlling how they saw him. But he had never asked himself the important question, what did he want? It wasn't about wealth or power. It wasn't about winning over women. It was about connection. It was about vulnerability. And maybe, just maybe, Maya had been right. Maybe love wasn't something you could buy. Maybe it was something that came from opening yourself up, from being real. The next time Alex saw Maya, he didn't bring gifts or flaunt his wealth. He simply sat across from her and spoke from his heart. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he began. "About how I've been living my life. And I think you're right. I've been hiding behind everything I have, but none of it has made me happy. None of it has given me what I've been looking for." Maya looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, there was silence. "And what is it that you've been looking for?" she asked. "I don't know yet," Alex said honestly. "But I'm willing to find out." In the following weeks, Alex began to change. He started to dismantle the walls he had built around himself. He took time to reflect on his past, on the people he had hurt, and the relationships he had destroyed. It wasn't easy. But it was necessary. He reached out to people from his past, making amends where he could. He began therapy, trying to understand the roots of his behavior, trying to understand the pain that had led him to shut himself off from others. And slowly, piece by piece, Alex began to feel something he had never truly felt before, hope. But even as Alex worked on himself, he couldn't escape the feeling that something was missing. Maya was still distant. He had opened up to her, but she hadn't responded the way he hoped. She had listened, but she hadn't embraced him. There was still a barrier between them. Alex didn't understand it. He had made so much progress. He had changed, hadn't he? But why wasn't Maya reaching out? Was this all just a lesson? Or was there more to it? One day, Maya called him. She asked to meet him, but when they sat down, the conversation took an unexpected turn. "I've been watching you," she said, her voice calm but firm. And I've seen the changes in you. But you're still not ready. You still don't love yourself. The words hit Alex like a brick. He had thought he was ready. He had thought he had done enough. But Maya's words cut deep, and for the first time, he saw the truth. He wasn't ready. Alex sat alone in his penthouse, the silence pressing in on him. The city lights outside gleamed like tiny stars, but they didn't offer him the same comfort they once did. He couldn't shake off Maya's words. You still don't love yourself. They echoed in his mind like a haunting refrain, and no matter how much he tried to push them away, they lingered, gnawing at him. He had come so far, or so he thought. He had opened up, made amends, and started facing the parts of himself he had long buried. But Maya had made it clear that he wasn't finished. The truth hit him harder than any insult could. He hadn't changed enough, not yet. The man who used to control everything with money, with his charm, and his wealth was slowly becoming someone else. But who was that someone? Could he really change? And more importantly, would Maya ever see the man he was becoming? Days passed in a blur, and Alex found himself spiraling. He worked on himself, attended therapy, and tried to be more honest in his interactions, but the emptiness lingered. Every time he looked in the mirror, he saw a version of himself that still felt like a stranger. One evening, after a long day of introspection, Alex received a message from Maya. She wanted to meet again. His heart raced as he read the message. A part of him wanted to reject the meeting, afraid of what might happen, or facing the fact that he hadn't changed enough. But another part of him knew that he had to confront it. He couldn't keep running away from the truth, especially not now. He agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe, hoping for clarity, but fearing that the distance between them had only grown. When he arrived, Maya was already sitting at a corner table, her back straight, her posture elegant. Her eyes met his as soon as he walked in, and for a moment, Alex felt a jolt of nervousness. This wasn't the Maya he had met before, this was someone more distant, more elusive. It was as if she was looking at him, but not really seeing him. You wanted to talk, she asked, her voice neutral. Alex sat down across from her, trying to steady his racing heart. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I thought I was changing, but nothing feels different. I thought if I did the work, I'd find something real, something lasting. But I'm still not sure I know what that means. Maya looked at him for a long moment. Her gaze wasn't soft, nor was it judgmental, it was simply searching, as if she was weighing his words, figuring out whether they held any truth. Alex, she said quietly, you can't force change. You've spent your life controlling everything, but you can't control love. It doesn't work that way. Her words stung, but this time, Alex didn't defend himself. He just listened, really listened. She wasn't trying to hurt him, she was simply telling him something he had been refusing to acknowledge. Love wasn't something that could be controlled, it had to be experienced. And he had to be vulnerable to truly experience it. You've been focusing on what you can give, Maya continued, her voice gentle but firm. But you haven't given yourself. You've never let anyone, especially yourself, see the real you. Alex stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. She was right. He had always been hiding behind layers, wealth, charm, and control, because he was terrified of what would happen if he let someone see the real him. I don't know how to do that, Alex admitted, his voice quiet. Maya smiled faintly. That's the first step. Admitting you don't know is the first step to understanding. For the next few days, Alex became more introspective. He found himself reflecting on the things he had always avoided, his childhood, his broken family, the ways in which he had learned to hide his true self behind walls. He couldn't remember the last time he had been honest with himself, much less anyone else. He began journaling, something he never thought he would do. Every night, he wrote down his thoughts, his struggles, and his fears. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. He was afraid of being hurt, afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of rejection. But what terrified him most was the thought of being alone, truly alone, without any walls to hide behind. His therapist had told him that vulnerability was the key to healing, but he hadn't fully understood what that meant. Now, he was beginning to realize that vulnerability wasn't just about letting people in, it was about letting himself out. One night, Alex decided to visit his childhood home. It was a small house in the suburbs, one he hadn't been to in years. As he stood in front of the house, memories flooded back, memories of his parents fighting, of the loneliness he felt as a child, of the walls he built to protect himself from the hurt. Inside the house, everything had changed. His parents had long since divorced, and the house was now empty. But as Alex walked through the rooms, it felt like time had stood still. He could still hear the echoes of his younger self, the boy who had learned that love wasn't something to be trusted. It was there, in the silence of that empty house, that Alex finally confronted his past. He realized that his fear of love, his need to control everything, stemmed from the brokenness he had carried with him for so long. And for the first time, he allowed himself to grieve. He cried deep, uncontrollable sobs that seemed to release something inside him. The next morning, Alex called Maya. He didn't know what he was expecting, but he needed to talk to her. He needed to tell her everything. "I've been to my childhood home," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been holding on to so much pain for so long. But I think I finally understand what I need to do. I need to let go. I need to stop controlling everything, and just be. But I don't know if I'm ready." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Maya spoke, her voice softer than it had ever been. "It's not about being ready, Alex. It's about taking the first step. And it sounds like you already have." The following weeks were a blur of change and growth for Alex. He began to open up to the people in his life, reconnecting with old friends and family members he had neglected for years. He started to embrace the uncomfortable feelings of vulnerability, allowing himself to feel, to experience, and to be present in the moment. But despite all his progress, there was still a part of him that wondered if Maya would ever truly accept him. Would she ever see the man he was becoming? Or would she always remain just out of reach? And then, as if on cue, Maya reached out again. "I think it's time we talk," she said. The night before Alex was set to meet Maya, he barely slept. The anticipation gnawed at him. Her words on the phone were simple, "I think it's time we talk." But they carried so much weight. What did she want to say? Was it closure? Or was there still a chance for something more? As the morning lights seeped through his penthouse windows, Alex stared out at the city skyline. It looked the same as it always did, cold, glittering, and distant. But for the first time, he felt like he was seeing it for what it was, a reflection of the life he had built. A life that looked perfect from a distance but was hollow up close. He arrived at the cafe early, choosing a corner table where they wouldn't be disturbed. He ordered coffee but barely touched it, his mind racing with possibilities. When Maya finally arrived, she looked calm, as if she had already made up her mind about what she was going to say. She sat down across from him, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp. Alex felt a lump form in his throat. This was it. "I've been watching you," Maya began, her voice steady. Not in a creepy way, she added with a faint smile, softening the tension. "But I've been paying attention to how you've been changing." Alex leaned forward, hanging on her every word. "And what do you see?" "I see a man who's trying," she said. "A man who's starting to understand what it means to live authentically." But she hesitated, and Alex felt his heart drop. I also see a man who still hasn't fully faced himself. Her words hit him like a tidal wave. He thought he had done the work, thought he had changed enough to be worthy of her. But Maya saw through him, as she always did. What else is there to face? He asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Maya's gaze softened. Yourself, Alex. Not the version you want others to see, but the real you. The one who's afraid, the one who feels lost, the one who doesn't have all the answers. Until you stop running from that part of yourself, you'll never be free. Alex sat back, her words sinking in. He had been so focused on fixing himself, on becoming the kind of man he thought Maya wanted, that he hadn't stopped to truly face his deepest fears. He had been treating his transformation like a checklist, a goal to achieve, instead of a journey to embrace. That night, Alex returned to his penthouse and did something he had avoided for years. He looked at old photographs of his family, photos he had buried in the back of a drawer. There was a picture of him as a child, sitting between his parents. His mother's smile was forced, and his father's arm was stiff around his shoulders. Even then, the cracks were visible. He remembered the nights when his father would come home late, smelling of alcohol, and his mother would retreat into silence. He remembered how invisible he felt, how unworthy of love. Those feelings had never left him. They had simply been buried, disguised as arrogance and control. Over the next few weeks, Alex dove deeper into his past, confronting the pain he had carried for so long. He spoke to his therapist about the memories that haunted him, about the fear of abandonment that had shaped his relationships. It was excruciating, but it was also liberating. He reached out to his father, a man he hadn't spoken to in years. Their conversation was awkward and stilted, but it was a start. Alex didn't expect a perfect reconciliation, he just wanted to let go of the anger that had been eating away at him for so long. Maya, meanwhile, had been watching from a distance. She saw the changes in Alex, the way he was beginning to let go of his need for control. She saw him becoming someone who wasn't defined by his wealth or his image but by his willingness to be vulnerable. One evening, she called him. "There's something I want to show you," she said. They met at a small park on the outskirts of the city. It was quiet, the kind of place Alex had never visited before. Maya led him to a bench overlooking a small lake, the water shimmering in the fading sunlight. "This is where I come when I need to think," Maya said, sitting down. "It reminds me that life is bigger than any one person. Bigger than our pain, our fears, or our past." Alex sat beside her, the serenity of the moment washing over him. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. As the weeks turned into months, Alex continued to grow. He wasn't perfect, far from it. He still had moments of doubt, moments where he wanted to retreat into his old habits. But each time, he reminded himself of what he had learned. He reminded himself of Maya's words, "Love isn't something you can control." Maya, too, began to open up. She shared more about her past, about the relationships that had shaped her, the pain she had endured. Alex realized that she wasn't as invulnerable as she seemed. She had her own fears, her own walls. But unlike him, she had learned to face them. The turning point came one evening when Alex and Maya were walking through the city. They passed a street performer playing a hauntingly beautiful melody on a violin. Alex stopped, listening to the music, and turned to Maya. "I don't know where this is going," he said, his voice trembling. "But I know I want to try. I want to keep growing, keep learning. And I want to do it with you, if you give me a chance." Maya looked at him, her eyes searching his face. For a moment, Alex thought she might walk away. But then, she smiled. "Let's see where it takes us," she said. The road ahead wasn't easy. There were setbacks, arguments, and moments of doubt. But for the first time, Alex wasn't running away. He was facing life head-on, with all its messiness and uncertainty. And Maya was by his side, not as a prize to be won but as a partner, an equal, a woman to be valued. In the end, Alex realized that love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about control or wealth or image. It was about connection, about being seen and accepted for who you truly were. And for the first time in his life, Alex felt vulnerable and responsible. What do you think? Do you think a man like Alex can truly change? Thank you for watching. Kindly drop your thoughts in the comment section. Please like, subscribe and share.